Good morning, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you stayed cool. It was obviously really, really hot for most of the weekend, as summer you would sort of expect it to be. But we have a great one planned for you today. I think you're going to really like this. So we know there is a lot of anticipation for the Georgia-Texas game. That's obviously true. And I think we have some evidence that these two powerful programs, at least based on some of the words from the pivotal figures involved in the game, are taking very different approaches to the game. That today, plus an update on UGA recruiting, and a special appearance, not special appearance, but a fun appearance, let's say it like that, from our buddy Jon Stinchcomb. So we're fully loaded on a Monday. Glad to have you with us as we get ready to celebrate our nation's birthday later on, but we're locked and loaded, ready to go here today. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella, Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So Texas and Oklahoma are now officially in the SEC. And obviously for Georgia that matters because the Dogs will play the Longhorns here this year. And I think we have some evidence here, and if you're a Georgia fan, I believe you're going to like this. I think we have some evidence here that these two programs are perhaps taking very different approaches to this big game. And some of the most important figures involved in the game are, I think, giving us a little bit of a window into this. We talked about this briefly on Friday. We have more information for you here right now that maybe the attitude around Texas is a little bit what you would think that attitude might be, and maybe the attitude around Georgia is exactly what you think that might be, which creates sort of an interesting clash for these two teams here right now. So let me start with this. We've had the Manning Passing Academy going on in New Orleans. This is the big event that takes place every year where the top college quarterbacks get a chance to go there. They rub elbows with each other. They have a chance to learn from the Mannings. It's sort of a rite of passage that many quarterbacks go through. Carson Beck has been there. Other top quarterbacks have been there, including Texas's Quinn Ewers. And when Ewers was speaking to the media, he said a very Texas-like thing about what the Longhorns are going to be like in the SEC. I want to show you this. I'll give you the headline and another quote. Here's the headline that got the most attention. Quinn Ewers on being in the SEC, we're going to be everybody's biggest game. And I think I'm probably a little bit like a lot of the folks who are Georgia fans or maybe SEC fans. There was something about that particular line that just didn't quite set right with me. I'm going to read you the rest of the quote here in a moment, and that is a lot more, I guess, sort of typical and, obviously respectful of the rest of the SEC. But this notion that, Texas, upon entering the SEC, becomes the biggest game for everybody in the SEC, I think there is a feeling, and I kind of right there with a lot of Georgia fans on this, of who do you think you are to assume that you're already everybody's biggest game, and who do you think you are especially to assume that you're already Georgia's biggest game? I think there is obviously some real truth to that. Now, he goes on to say that being in the SEC is definitely a different level. I've always wanted to play in the SEC. I know we're all excited to be a part of a conference like that. Football definitely means a lot for that conference. We're going into it full speed. We want to win the SEC championship, and we want to accomplish what we were so close to accomplishing last year. I know that we have a team that's more than capable of doing that. So that is Quinn Ewers saying kind of the right stuff there at the end, but obviously the original quote there of, we know we're everybody's biggest game, and we know that's the way that we're going to be treated. Now, the interesting thing about this is it's not just Ewers sort of speaking that way and saying those sorts of things. This is one of those deals where oftentimes players take on the personality of their coaches. And you perhaps, if you were listening or watching on Friday, you heard Texas coach Steve Sarkisian also express a similar sentiment of, as Texas joins the SEC, it has some sort of outsized, Texas-sized, perhaps bullseye on its back. What Ewers said there, very similar to what Steve Sarkisian has also said there as well. Sarkisian was recently on Greg McElroy's ESPN podcast. On3's reporters were listening to it, and they wrote it up, and I'll show you the quote from them. He says, nowadays, if we thought the bullseye was on Texas before, it's on us even bigger now. To go into this thing thinking we're not going to get every team's best shot, we're kidding ourselves. And it doesn't matter if it's Colorado State, Michigan, UTSA, we're going to get them all. So what you just heard Ewers say about, oh, we know we're going to be everybody's biggest game and get everybody's biggest shot. What Ewers said there about that, very, very similar to what Texas coach Steve Sarkisian has also said as well. So you would be, I think, led to believe then that if the coach and the quarterback are talking so similarly, this must be a line of chatter you're hearing a lot around the Texas program. As I said before, whether it's fair or not, I think my knee-jerk initial reaction to this was a little bit like a lot of other Georgia fans of, man, this is the sort of pompous arrogance we assume we'd be getting from Texas, and we're already getting it, and they've just barely joined the league. They assume that they're the biggest game for everybody, and we would say, in a non-rhetorical way, based on what? Based on one playoff appearance last year? Because prior to that, Texas had not won the Big 12 since 2009. The days of Mac Brown and Vince Young and beating, Reggie Bush and USC. I mean, honestly, that was at the turn of the century, basically, compared to where we are now. Texas has just on the field not been all that relevant. Yeah, they got a big fan base. Yeah, it's a big state overall. And obviously they do big business. We don't deny that. But this notion that just because they're Texas, all of a sudden that's going to be everybody's big game or biggest game. We would say the SEC's been playing big games, frankly, much bigger games than Texas is used to playing, certainly used to winning for quite some time here. So overall, I would say that my feeling about this was pretty similar to a lot of Georgia fans who didn't like it very much. But here is where I think the conversation changes, and here's where I think that things get, much more fun if you are a UGA fan. That the Texas approach here of, we're the big game, we got the bullseye on our back, everybody's coming for us because we're Texas, we know how good we are, if you don't believe us, just ask us. That whole feeling feels exactly like what you would sort of assume that you would get from Texas. But on the flip side of that, the approach that Georgia is taking to this game, apparently, once again, if we listen to central figures here, also starts to feel very much like what you would get from UGA. Now, I want to go back in time for a second to sort of set all this up. Do you remember at SEC Media Days, I guess this would have been after the 2021 season. This would have been Media Days, July of 2022, when Georgia had broken through and had won the national championship for the very first time under Kirby Smart. And so coming into Media Days that summer, the event happened to be in Atlanta that year. It'll be in Dallas this year. It was in Atlanta that particular year. Kirby Smart knew that he was going to be addressing the media with a different context around his words that had ever existed before. Because for darn near 40 years, anytime that a coach went to SEC Media Days, they were always having to speak. I'm talking about a Georgia coach. They were always having to sort of speak around the notion of what's it going to take for Georgia to break through? What's it going to take for Georgia to finally get it done? What's it going to take for Georgia to fulfill its full potential as a program and actually break through and have championship success? This was especially true in the first few years of the Kirby Smart era because Georgia had obviously gotten so much closer, and all of a sudden a national championship started to feel like a real possibility in a way that perhaps it hadn't always been kind of prior to the beginning of the Smart era. So that had been the chatter around the Georgia program. But in like July of 2022, all of a sudden now the program is the reigning national champion. Many of you remember this. Kirby Smart kind of laid out his mantra for that particular year that Georgia, because it had the belt around its waist, so to speak, was not going to buy into the notion that because they were now champions, they would be hunted by everybody else and that Georgia would get everybody's best shot. What Kirby Smart said, I know you remember this and we loved it at the time, what Kirby Smart says, we will not be hunted. We will be the ones that are out there doing all the hunting. It's a perfect message from the Georgia Bulldogs. And now in light of what Texas is saying of, oh, we know we're everybody's biggest game. We know everybody's going to be giving us their biggest shot. That's what Steve Sarkisian said. That's what the quarterback Quinn Ewers said. But that is not the approach that Georgia typically takes. And what Kirby Smart said in July of 2022 remains relevant for Georgia here right now. Because this week at the same Manning Passing Academy, that Quinn Ewers is talking about being the biggest game for everybody in the SEC because they're big bad Texas, who's had like one good season this century or a couple of good seasons this century. Everybody's biggest shot coming the way of Texas. That is not the way that Carson Beck was talking. Beck obviously acknowledges the level of competition that comes in because of the new members of the league, but he also echoes the words from Kirby Smart that you heard a moment ago. Now, before I play this clip for you, let me also communicate with my people. So I am, for whatever reason, having a terrible time with my batteries in my headphones today. So when we play this clip, I'm not going to be able to hear it. I'm going to try to fix the batteries here before we bring on Jon Stinchcomb here, but I'm not going to be able to hear this clip. But I do want to play it for the rest of our audience to be able to hear it, and I'm going to need some sort of cue to let me know when it's okay for me to start speaking again. But I do have a little bit of an issue as it relates to that, and if I can get some fresh batteries, it'll also kind of fix me up for the rest of the show. For whatever reason, our rechargeable batteries didn't charge, which is more than the audience needs to hear. But let's play the clip, and then if I can get a cue from somebody that it's okay to start speaking again, we'll see if we can get the headphones working for the rest of the show. Here is Carson Beck.
Competition. Obviously, adding two really good teams. The SEC is already one of the hardest conferences. You look all over. I mean, the competition is everywhere. The talent is everywhere. So I think it, obviously, like you said, it adds two teams, and I think it'll add for some more exciting matchups.
When you guys have been the hunted now for a couple of years, is it? How do you look at a schedule from that standpoint as you look ahead to 2024?
Yeah, no, I mean, and Coach Smart says this too, but like we don't get hunted. Like we do the hunting. No matter what, even if we're at 1, we're at 10, we're whatever the ranking is, we are always doing the hunting. Absolutely.
And listen, when you hear Beck right there, echoing the words of his coach, the same way that Quinn Ewers was echoing the words of his coach, if you're a Georgia fan, I don't know how you couldn't just love that. Quinn Ewers says what Steve Sarkisian says. Everybody's going to give their best shot to Texas. What Carson Beck says in so many words is, yeah, we're to give Texas our best shot because we give everybody our best shot. We don't buy into the notion of being the hunted. We don't buy into the notion of having a bullseye on our back. At Georgia, as our coach, Kirby Smart, has told us, we're the ones who do the hunting, and we put the bullseye on everybody's back. We put every opponent we play into the crosshairs, and that's how we approach it. Isn't that fun? Doesn't that make you even more excited for this Georgia-Texas game coming up this October? This notion that Texas is going about it almost exactly the way you would expect Texas to go about it, by assuming they're the biggest team in the game, by assuming they have the bullseye on their back, by assuming that everybody is licking their chops and chomping at the bit to be validated because they get a chance to play mighty Texas. It's the sort of pompous arrogance, or at least it has the whiff of the sort of pompous arrogance that you would assume Texas would have, and so far they're kind of living up to their billing on. But on the flip side of that, the kind of humble and hungry attitude that you would hope to hear and see from Georgia if you are a UGA fan, it seems like Georgia's once again living up to that there as well. They're more than happy to let Texas feel like they've got a bullseye, and more than happy, it would seem anyway, to let Texas believe that they're going to get everybody's best shot, including Georgia, by the way, because Georgia would say, we give everybody our best shot, and we treat every team we play as if it was Texas or some big team who thinks it's the biggest possible matchup we can possibly have. We want to go out there and hunt and hunt and hunt every team we play. That includes the Texas Longhorns in Austin in October. The Longhorns are now in the SEC. They're about to find out what business feels like in this league. I think that Georgia may be more than ready to give them an introduction when they take place and battle against each other later on this fall. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And we are happy to have you with us on the program here today, no matter how you get to us, across all video platforms at 10 a.m. or on the radio at noon on App and Sports Radio 960 The Ref. We're available as a podcast wherever you find them, Apple, Spotify, everything else in between. Just really happy to have you as a part of the program. And I'll tell you one of the things you can do for us, if you would not mind, especially for those of you watching on YouTube, very simple thing. If you would just click the like button on that. I've told you before, I haven't always been super aggressive about, like, getting you to help us promote the show. But a simple thing like that goes a long way in terms of, I guess, manipulating the big tech algorithm in our favor. So if you're watching the show, you want to just sort of click that like button on YouTube, or if you're watching another platform, you want to go to YouTube and click the like button for it. It just sort of helps people see us and know us and realize that we're out there. So I would certainly appreciate all of that here today. Also, really appreciate our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making the show possible. I was seeing something the other day about our friends at Pella being a great supporter of one of the local schools in the area and really investing in a local community. I love that about the whole team over there, really kind of caring about what, makes Georgia a great place to live. And obviously that's the same level of care and concern they're going to take when it comes to the thing they're famous for, which are energy-efficient windows and doors, and making sure your home is properly installed with those energy-efficient windows and doors. That is what Pella Window and Door of Georgia is all about for you there as well. Now, this time of the year, that really matters because it is like oppressively hot. I'm talking about just like obscenely hot. And so therefore, when your air conditioning is probably working harder than it's going to have to work all year long, I'm talking about cranked up in a huge way here. And we know how expensive that is. Those energy bills kind of go up during the summertime of year. Well, if that's the case, you want to be as efficient as you can. And now I can hear myself. That's awesome. Great stuff there. Thanks, y'all, for kind of tolerating a little bit of a weird issue on that. But now I'm hearing myself sound great. And I'll just finish what I was saying here, that those energy-efficient windows from Pella Window and Door of Georgia kind of keep that AC inside the house where it's supposed to be. It also looks great on the outside there as well. So it's a great time to connect with our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. You can stop by and see them. Experience Center right there in Duluth. Let them kind of educate you what makes the Pella product better. You can put your hands on it. You can feel it. They'll also come out and visit with you in your home and kind of see your space and talk about how what they have can fit your needs there in your own home. That's always a really valuable conversation there, too. Just make sure you tell them that BA from DawgNation Daily said they take good care of you, because I know that they will. In fact, they can also give you special savings right now between now and July 31st. If you buy 4 windows, you get 1 free, or you can get 0% APR for 4 years. So incredible savings there on that, too. Here's how you can get in touch. Give them a call. 678-638-1429. That's 678-638-1429, or find them online, pellaofga.com/DawgNation. One more time, that's pellaofga.com/DawgNation. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. All right, we are going to get Jon Stinchcomb here coming up in just a moment. Fun conversation to have with John. That is on the way. Prior to that, I want to give you a little bit of an update on UGA recruiting. Obviously, a hot time around that topic, and I want to do some of that with you here right now as we get ready to go around the doghouse poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. Let me give you, I guess, one piece of what could be good news and one piece of what I guess is possible bad news here, but it kind of gives you an idea of sort of what is coming up next, perhaps, for the 2025 class for Georgia. Let me start with this. One of the things that we've said, I think, is that for all of the energy that exists around Georgia in certain positions, we've talked a lot about wide receiver, what might that turn out to be. We have definitely hammered over and over again offensive and defensive lines. I'd say thus far that perhaps for Georgia is going really well. One of the things we've talked about, though, is that a little bit different than some Georgia classes, there hasn't been as much certainty around Georgia and its opportunity with top-flight defensive backs. We just haven't seen as much chatter around that. We haven't been too sure about where all that's perhaps going. But we did maybe have the first inkling of Georgia really getting a chance to connect with a top-flight prospect who is a cornerback for this 2025 class. Let me show you this on the screen here. Steve Wiltfong, national reporter for On3, has now made an official prediction for Georgia to flip the 4-star cornerback Shamari Earls from South Carolina to Georgia. Georgia already kind of winning a battle against South Carolina earlier this cycle when it got Zayden Walker to commit, even though Walker had a little bit of a family tie to South Carolina. The Gamecocks were thought to be a factor in that recruitment. Now perhaps taking the next step of flipping a top South Carolina commit, Shamari Earls, writing on the X platform that, Earls the number 69 player nationally, number 8 cornerback in the class of 2025, according to the On3 300. So perhaps a piece of good news there as it relates to Georgia flipping a defensive back, and a good one away from South Carolina. Wiltfong's one of those guys that doesn't typically make any kind of statement like this unless, he feels pretty confident in it, doesn't just sort of put that out there for no reason. So that's a pretty sizable prediction that Georgia could be about to land a pretty big-time defensive back. But even with Georgia having the recruiting success that it's had, you still don't quite get everybody. And there was a Georgia target this weekend who did announce his commitment elsewhere. Julius Holly is a edge rusher from the Alpharetta Raiders program here in the Atlanta area of Georgia. But this weekend, once again, we'll show you this on the screen, Holly did announce his commitment to Michigan. So this is a four-star edge rusher from Alpharetta, choosing the Wolverines, as was reported, over Georgia, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M. Holly himself saying 100% committed here on this. So Georgia not getting this edge rush prospect, and kind of leads you to wonder, okay, where does that leave Georgia with, like, say, Bryce Davis, who's going to make his decision later on in July? I would say at this point in time, it's not quite certain exactly what that means for that, or, if there is an obvious replacement for what Holly would be here at this edge rush position here right now. Maybe Davis ends up being that guy, but it's certainly not, the same way you've got like the official predictions there for Georgia and Earls. I don't know that you're getting those for Georgia and Davis here right now. So Holly, a guy from Alpharetta, the thing that Georgia had some interest in, ends up going to Michigan, and we'll see if Georgia has a response for that, whether it be Bryce Davis, whether it be, somebody else there. So perhaps a piece of good news in the fact that Shamari Earls might be trending to UGA, and perhaps a piece of at least, somewhat bad news in that a edge rush guy that Georgia had targeted does make his commitment to Michigan. And I would believe that's sort of the snapshot of where things are from a recruiting standpoint. I also know that Jeff spent the weekend in Bradenton, Florida, as a part of the event taking place at IMG Academy. Had a chance to speak to Jared Curtis, the 2026 quarterback commit, and some other interesting names of note there. So that all is coming at DawgNation.com. There's also been some good stuff from Jeff going back to that on the weekend there, too. So make sure you check that out. And that is Around the Doghouse, poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. Now, I'm going to tell you a true story here for a moment. I don't know if this is Dr. Pepper, if this is what they necessarily want as the, I guess, the main marketing message as it relates to this, but I've been telling you for a while about the Dr. Pepper brand new flavor, the creamy coconut, and the Dr. Pepper creamy coconut zero sugar. So, true story. We're at the pool on Saturday getting together with some neighbors, looked across the pool, saw a guy. He had the Dr. Pepper creamy coconut, and he was popping the top on that and pouring it as a mixture into a drink with another liquid going on there. So perhaps there are some valuable mixture opportunities going on when it comes to the Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut and the Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut Zero Sugar. He saw me give him a glance. He said, BA, I love my Dr. Pepper, which we also love here around here, whether you're drinking it with itself or you're kind of using that to accompany another beverage that you might also be enjoying. Either way, Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut and Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut Zero Sugar is a great part of your overall summer experience. So as you are out there doing your grocery shopping here this summer, stopping by your local Kroger or wherever you're doing all of that, make sure you try some Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut and Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut Zero Sugar, a great thing for the summer. And obviously, we love our friends at Dr. Pepper being a part of Around the Doghouse, and we know how excited Dr. Pepper is about all the exciting things taking place as we move through the rest of the summer. With Texas and Oklahoma now officially joining the SEC, the league gets bigger, and our friends at Dr. Pepper obviously love that because of their long time connection and ties to Georgia football. Now, before we're done on today's program, we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of the official joining of Texas and Oklahoma into the league. This was obviously a very, I was actually somewhat surprised that it got the treatment that it got. Like, there was a lot of TV coverage of it. The two programs really kind of rolled it out in a pretty big way. This is one of those deals that I didn't quite know was going to get turned into a thing quite as much as it did, but it was definitely, kind of turned into that. So pretty big deal on that. And perhaps more importantly, there was a very, very interesting prediction made by Paul Finebaum this week as it relates to, we just talked a lot about Quinn Ewers, but a pretty interesting prediction involving Arch Manning that I think we need to get to before the program is done here today. That was, I think, pretty interesting and a pretty big conversation starter, which we will get to here coming up in just a few minutes. We were also, as you can probably tell, I'm tab dancing here just a little bit. We're going to connect with Jon Stinchcomb here in just a moment there as well. While we're waiting for Jon, can I go ahead and do this? Let me just give people a reminder that we just talked about the Georgia game against Texas and obviously the excitement about that. Many of you know we have a big DawgNation Invasion event coming up in Austin later on in October. We've also got a huge DawgNation event in Tuscaloosa in September. So there are big trips in store for Georgia fans here this fall. But the kickoff to all of that is going to be our DawgNation Invasion tailgate to begin the season in Atlanta. Obviously, Georgia taking on Clemson. I mean, can you believe what a schedule we have for these dogs here in 2024? What a remarkable thing. And at DawgNation, we're thrilled about being a part of that, both when it comes to the big road games, the big road trips we're taking for those games, but also that big season kickoff event to begin the year. So you've heard us talk about this. If you go to DawgNation.com/tailgate, you can secure your spot for that tailgate. And we're doing obviously kind of a breakfast-themed tailgate because of the early start. That means eggs and bacon and sausage and like the pastries and all the kind of stuff associated with that, the Bloody Marys, the mimosas. And if you want like regular, kind of cocktails and regular beers and wines, obviously we'll do that too. But if you really like the idea of getting kind of the breakfast-themed tailgate kind of rolling into the noon start against Clemson, we've got a fun thing set up for you. And if you're one of the first 250 to secure your spot, that also guarantees you one of our coveted DawgNation Invasion t-shirts. I do believe this is going to be a fun one. And a great way to kick off the 2024 season with our big event there in Atlanta. Go to DawgNation.com/tailgate for more on that. DawgNation.com/tailgate for more on that. All right. Still waiting on Jon Stinchcomb, is that right? Okay, so a little bit of a thing there on that. So we'll get that squared away. So it seems like we've had a lot of this as of late, and I certainly apologize for that. But why don't we do this? Let's just kind of keep the conversation going. We'll go ahead and cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean, and we'll see if we can catch up with Jon Stinchcomb there on the other side of that. So let's do that here today. And thanks for your patience. We kind of roll through some of this and hey, listen, we're just having a good time on a Monday. So how about a little bit of a cruise around the SEC? Then we'll get to Jon Stinchcomb coming up after that.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, so Jon Stinchcomb in a moment. Let me just take a quick moment to shout this out, and then we'll get back to the content. You guys know DawgNation Cruise up and running here right now. The response has already been remarkable to be on board Utopia of the Seas. I don't want to belabor this here today because we need to get back to the show, but we want to see you there in April on board Utopia of the Seas, sailing out of Port Canaveral, going to Perfect Day, Coco Cay, going to Nassau in the Bahamas, on the newest of the new ships from Royal Caribbean. You can book yours today if you'll simply go to DawgNationCruise.com. So DawgNationCruise.com, that's the website. DawgNationCruise.com. You can, our good friend Jessica Slater going to help you out with that, getting you on board and ready to go on Utopia of the Seas. It's April 21st to the 25th. You know how much I love Utopia of the Seas. You know how much I'm excited about that for myself. All of that online, DawgNationCruise.com. We hope to see you there. So as we told you a moment ago, we do officially have Texas and Oklahoma now in the SEC. Big ceremony on that, kind of getting us rolling there on that. So I was kind of amazed at the response this sort of got. And I think the one thing that you now know for sure is that the league is going to feel different forever because of this. It is not really a Southeastern conference anymore. The overall, geographic center of this league has moved farther and farther west as the league has gotten bigger and bigger. And there will be some things that you will notice differently about that. That the way in which you kind of define, what the league is and kind of, what the league's about, a lot of that is now going to feel, different because of this. The simple fact that the SEC Media Days is in Dallas this year is a little bit of for instance, there on that. And that when I was a kid, I'm actually old enough to remember even before South Carolina and Arkansas came in the league. When it was a 10-team league and all those teams were definitely in the geographic Southeast, there was a commonality of thought that also existed around that. Teams in a sort of that share a similar piece of land also oftentimes share a similar outlook. And as the geographic location of the league changes, the consensus around what's right for the league is going to change a little bit too. As I've told you before, I don't think it's a coincidence that in this new age of the SEC, a league that has always had pretty close to unanimous agreement about what's right, what's next, what should happen. All of a sudden, that unanimity doesn't really exist anymore. They can't agree on the 8-team conference schedule or the 9-game conference schedule. I think the disagreement will now be the norm because you just don't have league members sharing the same kind of commonalities you've had in the past. Even if Greg Sankey likes touting what he's talking about, the contiguous nature of the fact that each SEC team exists in the state that touches another SEC state. Ultimately, I'm not really quite so sure, that kind of provides the sort of unanimity that you want. And in the kind of the post-Mike Slive era, Slive was able to kind of convince a lot of these, programs to stop dropping dimes on each other and turning each other into the SEC, I should say into the NCAA. Since then, there's been a large level of cooperation in this league. And I wonder, in kind of a Texas-Oklahoma world where they're now a part of the SEC, I wonder how much of that cooperation there's going to really be. Let me also give you this, speaking of Texas. I thought this was interesting. Paul Finebaum was being interviewed somewhere, and he was asked about, what he thought about Arch Manning, and his prediction was that Arch Manning would be the quarterback at Texas by the end of the year. Now, let's be honest here for a moment. Obviously, Paul Finebaum, based on his own, I think, knowledge, doesn't necessarily know this. But if he's saying this, my guess is it's probably because he's heard this from somewhere. And I think this lines up pretty closely with what you've also kind of heard us say at times here too, is that, there were moments a year ago in which I really found Quinn Ewers to be very impressive. I mean, he goes into Tuscaloosa and plays a very big football game and made some very big throws, attacking Alabama in an area in which was weak. Connor Riley and I were talking about this the other day. Attacking that Alabama secondary deep down the field. Ewers had the big game. But if you want to fast forward to later on, when it was the battle between Ewers and Michael Penix in the college football playoff, that's a game that Texas had every chance to win. I thought that Ewers was kind of only just okay in that game. I did not think he was special. And if Arch Manning is what we have been told that he could be, which thus far, the reviews on Manning have actually been pretty good. If Arch Manning is what we've been told he could be, if Ewers, as the guy that's currently standing as the starting quarterback for Texas, if he's not special, then holding off Manning for a full year may prove to be very hard to do. Now, if we take Finebaum at his word and that transition eventually occurs, does that happen before Georgia plays Texas in October? I would suggest probably not. That might be a little too soon. But when Finebaum says before the end of the year, it probably will happen. I can't just completely disregard that, on spec. I can't disregard that just on first blush. I think there's a chance it could occur too, even if Ewers himself is a pretty impressive NFL prospect. Fascinating time there. They've been able to hold on to Manning. They've been able to keep him waiting in the wings, but can you keep him on the bench forever? Perhaps not. Finebaum may prove to be right about that, and we'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And now we'll turn our attention to our great guest on a Monday. Always love having him to talk about everything going on with Georgia football, including a lot of Texas talk here today, the big showdown in Austin come October. So let's do all of that and do, as we love to do, bring on Jon Stinchcomb here today, DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So happy to have Jon Stinchcomb as a part of our program here today. And as we were talking about, the sort of official arrival of Texas and Oklahoma into the league. And John, before you joined us, I was talking a little bit about the big game between Georgia and Texas and what, to my eyes, looks like a very different approach by both these teams to this game, and in some respects kind of in keeping what we would expect from both these programs. And I totally acknowledge the fact that I might be more bothered by this than perhaps maybe it deserves to be. But when you got Quinn Ewers and Steve Sarkisian both saying, we know we're going to get everybody's biggest shot, essentially making the assumption they're the biggest game for now every team in the SEC, despite the fact that Georgia's won 2 of the last 3 national championships, there's a sort of unearned arrogance there that I read into that quote that is a little hard for me to shake off. But on the flip side of this, you got Carson Beck saying, hey, we're not going to be hunted. We're going to be the hunter. And so this is obviously echoing what Kirby Smart said in the past. So in some respects, at least based on the quotes that are out there right now, Georgia's going about its preparation for Texas, or its mental preparation maybe, exactly the way that you think that Georgia would. And Texas is kind of anticipating all of this. in sort of exactly the way that you think the Longhorns might, based on their reputation, I find that to be pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's an approach that I'm much more would like to resonate with at the University of Georgia than I would Texas, because I want to be the hunter. I want to be pursuing. I want to feel like we're the ones who have to go out and prove something rather than protect something. And that sounds like the approach that Texas has taken. Like they've got to protect this preseason ranking that maybe they're already buying into. And, let's agree, they're both very talented teams, but mentality is, especially in the collegiate game, it is huge. I don't want to say it's everything, but when you're talking about two highly talented teams, would you rather have an approach that says, hey, we're not worried about the other guy. We've got to go out there. We've got to worry about us. We've got to work on our game and prove to the world who we think we can be, versus, we know everybody else is coming after us and I'm worried about what they're doing. And, then it's almost the motivation is fear to, let down, or rather than a fear to than an opportunity to prove. We got to go out there and show the world what we're capable of. So very different approaches, and you can see it resonate with players. And I think Georgia has proven that approach, that we're not going to be the hunted, we're going to be the hunter, certainly does echo when you talk to players across the locker room, and they buy into it.
And I want to be clear about one thing here. While I kind of get on Texas, what I believe is a little bit of an unearned arrogance when it comes to statements like this, the truth is, John, I also think on the field last year, I've got to give Steve Sarkisian credit. I thought they did take a pretty big step forward as a program. They were good on both lines of scrimmage. They certainly looked like they were preparing themselves for the SEC with the way they went about winning those games in the Big 12. And I've also said this, nobody in the Big 12 wanted to see Texas win that league. They were dead last in the country in terms of penalties called against their opponents. Like, they did not get much of a break from the officials a year ago. Not an easy league to win when you're on your way out. So while I'm a little irritated with kind of the overall kind of, I guess, inflated opinion the program seems to have of itself, the truth is I did think they were pretty impressive a year ago, and making the college football playoff for a guy like Sarkisian was, I believe, a real accomplishment. So my point in all this is that I do think that Texas is a good team, and I do believe this is a really big game. And I really do think that as a Georgia fan, there is a little extra juice around the idea of, man, I don't want Texas to come in here and, win this league in its first year. I don't want to give any credence to what they already sort of think about themselves. I mean, if I'm just being completely honest, there is a level of emotion around, I really don't want what they think about themselves to be proven true, because they are a good enough team, I believe, on paper, that if we're all not careful, they could come in here and make a big statement in their first year.
Yeah, it's about approach. And I think if we were to actually flip the table a little bit and say, this is Longhorn Nation instead of Dog Nation,
right,
as we're talking, we would say this looks like a very talented team. I'm excited about this season. There is a lot of pieces in place, both we believe in the coaching staff. We believe in the direction of the program. This is an arrow up program that showed last year that, maybe they do have what it takes to be nationally relevant and more than just competitive in the best conference in football, which is what we're going into. With that said, they have 0 wins this season, like every other team out there. And I think it's an approach issue. I think it's a matter of, if I'm leading that program, I want the guys in my room to know and believe that we've got a real shot at this thing. And we've got the right guys, but there's a lot of work to do. And what we're going to tell the world is we've proven nothing, that we have to earn everything, and that we're going to chase after that championship because we haven't got one here in a long time. And that's what we're about. So it's more than just, hey, we've made it. We feel like we've got the right things, and now we've got to protect it. I don't like that approach. I think when you hear those guys say, everybody's coming after us, that's the focus is in the wrong place. You're looking at the other team going, hey, we're getting their best shot, as opposed to what we hear out of Athens. And what we hear out of Athens is we are going to prepare to give every team our best shot. And they're the ones who need to be worried about us, because we're not holding back and trying to protect, but we're seeking out. We're coming in there to raid that field every time we get a chance to do it.
I think that's exactly right, and I'm glad you said it that way. Let me also mention this, and I can't remember if you and I have talked about this before. I've certainly talked about this plenty this summer, which is that on paper, as I told you before, I think that Texas is pretty good. And I would say if I'm comparing Texas to Alabama, I'd say I like probably Texas better as a team right now than I probably like Alabama. So the point I'm getting to is we know that Georgia and Texas are going to play in October. I would say if I was a betting person, I would say the most likely opponent for Georgia in the SEC championship is also probably a rematch with Texas. And if the two teams are going to play there, they could play a third time in the college football playoff as well, because it's a 12-team playoff this year. And we're going to just see a lot more rematches in the playoffs moving forward, because it'll be the expected teams who are back in there again. So the point I've kind of brought up before, John, is that right now there's not a lot of history between Georgia and Texas. We have some memory of the 2018 Sugar Bowl. I am just old enough to have a very faint memory of the famous Georgia win against Texas in the 83 Cotton Bowl. It's probably the first college football game I can really remember in my lifetime. That there's like this tiny little bit of history between these two programs. But, John, if you play two and perhaps in some crazy set of circumstances a third time in the same season, we could exit 2024 with Georgia and Texas feeling like legit rivals. You could create a lot of history for yourself in just a short period of time. And in a world in which Georgia's probably not playing Auburn every year moving forward, not playing Tennessee every year moving forward, eventually some of those teams with an 8-game conference schedule, those opponents are going to have to cycle off the Georgia schedule. The fact of the matter is that moving forward, Texas may be a real rival for Georgia in a way that it kind of doesn't really seem right now.
Very well could be, and more so than Ohio State. I know there's in Georgia, at least, there's a lot more folks that are aware and probably have a disdain for Ohio State now that we've crossed paths with them. And with Texas being in that same realm of, unfamiliar foe, but also very talented, I can see that probably accelerating that path to rival quicker than you could other programs. And it's similar to the NFL, where you're seeing teams multiple times in a year, especially within your division and potentially more. But, the difference is, I think you look at this for Texas and you go, I think Georgia's familiar with playing good opponents with a consistent basis and having to win games where you're not always playing your best. And I'm not specifically talking about Texas versus Georgia, but I'm talking about those games in between. For Texas, I think, in my opinion, they've been able to gear up more for those big games and those big opportunities. And now that might be a little different, because those gear up weeks are against good opponents. Yeah. Not everybody's Georgia, not everybody's Alabama, but those games in between are not that separation that they've been accustomed to.
So, changing the subject here for a moment, we've been watching some of the EA Sports video game rating stuff that's been kind of coming out here. It's been really interesting to see that Georgia getting the top ranking overall based on having the number 1 overall offense, number 2 overall defense. The point I made going back to Friday was, if you look at the EA Sports rankings, they had 6 teams with both a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. The point we made, John, is that in a video game, you can make anything true that you want. You can digitally create any reality you like for yourself. In fact, they had, Colorado in their overall top 25, even though on the field, Buffalo's may be lucky to win 4 games. But if it's a video game and Colorado's popular, well, you can just do whatever you want to do. And, digitally, you have the power to do that. But in real life, what we said was there won't be 6 teams who have both a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. And Georgia's ability in many years to kind of be the only team playing with that level of excellence on both sides of the ball probably explains Georgia's championship success as much as anything. Kirby Smart likes to talk about complementary football. That's what it is. And if Georgia is once again the most complementary team in America, the way that EA Sports suggested it could be, I think that sort of bodes well for Georgia on the field too. And if somebody else does that better than Georgia, then Georgia probably won't win the national championship here this year. So in other words, the video game stuff may be kind of made up, but it's still a pretty good reminder of what matters in real life as well, right?
Yes, and I think what separates Georgia over these past few years is that's been their approach. They've wanted a balanced attack, if you will. We're going to value and prioritize both sides of the ball. And I think we've seen in other champions where they just are superior on one side of the ball or the other. And in recent years, it's probably more offense. And you look back at some of the teams that have been national champions over the past 10 years, and offensively, they have had superstars, specifically at the quarterback position, and they can ultimately change a game. That hasn't always come in addition to having the world's, a top 5 defense. I think they were just boat racing folks and said, try to keep up. And that was their recipe. So, in the games, you're trying to create, some sort of reality that fans can enjoy. And if I'm playing with a top 10 team, I don't want to have to worry about, my defense isn't able to stop anybody. And that's they're in the entertainment business more so than any of us related to this game. And I think that's what's reflected. But, man, it makes it fun. Those are good arguments to have, not only in the locker room as a player, but outside of them, of just, you always want something to prove. I know that first opportunity I had to play on a team where I didn't have to create myself into the game, but found myself in a game. It was a pretty cool opportunity.
I would imagine
it's the same thing for fans. You want your team to be great. So, those are fun experiences.
No, I would imagine that probably is true, and that's kind of a really cool thing to think about. Also, the other thing related to some of these ratings that's gotten some attention from fans is Georgia had the number 5 overall, I guess, home field advantage. Georgia hasn't lost a home game since, 2019? This is one of those deals where, some Georgia fans have different opinions than others, whereas, I think some Georgia fans want to see the program rated higher on a list like that. There are also some Georgia fans who have at times been critical of whether it be older alumni not standing up and cheering or whatever, that might happen to kind of create the advantage in the stadium. There are some Georgia fans who've actually been a little critical at times of the home field advantage that Georgia does create for itself. I go everywhere. I've seen just about every stadium in the SEC with the exception of down in Gainesville. I actually think the Georgia home field advantage is pretty good, and I think the Georgia fans do a good job of cultivating that in the stadium. What do you think about the overall vibe on Sanford Stadium in game day? It's also gotten some attention because of some of this EA Sports stuff. How good of a job do you think Georgia is doing right now at creating the kind of home field advantage that a program the caliber of Georgia deserves?
I think it has changed. I would not have assessed Georgia, let's call it pre-Kirby era, in the same realm as what it is now. I've been to games a number of times, either played in them or, most recently, obviously, as a fan. And I think the climate in Sanford Stadium has changed drastically. I think it's come with winning. Obviously, that certainly helps rally the troops. And I think you look at some of the most volatile environments you play in, and that usually corresponds with one another. They work hand in hand. And so when you've got a fan base that is inspired and an atmosphere and a team that kind of builds into that, and that combo is what makes these environments tough to play in. I have played in places and been the beneficiary and been the opponent in various environments, and it can certainly be a factor. I think Georgia ranked top 5 is probably pretty accurate. I know in those night games where it's, the red out, and there have been some really big games. I think the Tennessee game was it last year, year before, that was, you could hardly hear yourself think, much less the person next to you, and it was the entire game. So I think the Georgia fan base has really stepped their game up to match the level of play that the football team has provided inside Sanford Stadium. And it is a top 5 and rising atmosphere. I think, you continue to provide those type atmospheres as a fan base, and you can see that ranking increase, but it has not always been that way. And I think it has been a cultivation and change in culture for the fan base more than anything, and it's certainly headed in the right direction.
Let me finish with this, John. Obviously, you and I have talked a lot about the future of Georgia, Florida, and Jacksonville. We found out this week the stadium renovations for Jacksonville are going to take place. This is going to become a state-of-the-art NFL stadium, whereas for the last couple of decades, they've probably been playing in something, I'm talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars, a little bit below the typical NFL standard. That's about to change. This is going to be a remarkable new venue when it's all said and done. It looks like Georgia, Florida is going to remain a longtime partner of this stadium there in Jacksonville. You certainly get the sense about that. In fact, we've even had more confirmation of some reporting that took place last fall that even in 2026 and 2027, while the stadium is being essentially rebuilt, that Georgia, Florida probably still won't be going home and home for that. They're going to probably still find, a neutral site venue somewhere, whether in Florida or here in Atlanta or wherever, to play those games, because the best we can tell, they just have gotten very used to, both Georgia and Florida, the kind of money that comes in from one of these neutral site games. And, John, in a day and age in which every dollar matters because of the House settlement and because of NIL and because of all of that, that the likelihood at one point in time, I think we would have thought, well, maybe Georgia, Florida will kind of become a home and home here because of all the other change happening around college athletics. But now that there's such a premium on finances because of all the debits that the college programs are getting used to seeing coming out of their accounts, that it's actually kind of turned into a little bit of an advantage for both Georgia and Florida to have this game. Is that the sense that you get, that even for 2026 and 2027, this game is likely to be neutral site somewhere, and that the cocktail party with a brand new stadium is going to live on perhaps for many years to come?
Yeah, I think when you looked at it pre-House settlement, pre-changing landscape of the need for financials to really be a factor in decision-making, I thought the home and home made a lot of sense for 26 and 27. As let's see, does it make sense to transition away from the greatest cocktail party game and go home and home, because there's benefits to recruiting and there's all the benefits that Coach Smart has laid out time and time again. With that said, finances is always a factor. And it's even more so now when you're trying to balance budgets and understand that you can't cut the pie the same way it's been cut for years. There's going to be decisions that are made. And if here is a way to, quote unquote, keep things the same with a neutral site and it be financially beneficial, and we already recognize the shortcomings that it provides or offers for our program, and we're willing to live with those because of those financial benefits, I think that part of the equation has certainly changed. And I can see it remaining neutral site for a long time. I always thought that it would be hard to change it, and this stadium renovation kind of provided a small window that otherwise might not exist. And I think because of the timing of it and matching up with the financial changes that are happening across college athletics, it's going to be a little more difficult to make that transition away from a neutral site game.
John, I think that's well said. I hope you and your family are getting ready for a great 4th of July here coming up this week, enjoying some time, trying to stay cool the best you can, but also enjoying some of the summer fun there too. We will let you do that. We'll look forward to having you back here again on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, very soon as well.
I always appreciate you having me on, BA. Go Dogs, and I hope you have a great Independence Day as well.
Right back to you, John. Absolutely great stuff. Thank you so much. And, John, talking about the Georgia-Florida game in Jacksonville, I said this the other day, and I believe I'm probably right about this. There was a time not all that long ago that Kirby Smart was more than happy to kind of spar with you about this game. Like remember we talked about the SEC Media Days being in Atlanta in 2022. There was that moment on the SEC Network where Tim Tebow arguing on behalf of keeping the game in Jacksonville and Kirby Smart arguing in behalf of moving the game to a home and home. And they were just kind of having some fun with this on TV. And I think that Kirby was mostly arguing with that just for the sport of it, just kind of, I think he was just sort of into it and just kind of decided to kind of go with it. But we also know that he has been of the belief that it would be better for Georgia recruiting to have that extra home game. my prediction, I believe I'll turn out to be right about this, is I don't think Kirby Smart's going to make that argument anymore. I really don't. Even if in a perfect world he'd probably prefer to have the Georgia-Florida game at home. We know in the past he certainly made that pretty clear. I think Kirby, with that sort of business sense that he also has, probably understands that every dollar now counts more so than it ever has before. And when you have a chance to get dollars that your rival programs don't have a chance to get, and other than Florida, most of them don't, well, you got to take advantage of every opportunity there on that. So my guess is that's probably what Georgia is going to do, and that's probably the kind of, I guess, public posture that Kirby Smart will take on this going forward. Let me also give a quick shout-out here to our friends at Precision Garage Door. You know, we talk about Kirby Smart recruiting, 5-star recruits always coming in, but how about for our friends at Precision Garage Door, that 5-star reputation for excellent service? I'm talking about all kinds of reviews online back that point up. People see the work that Precision Garage Door is doing, whether it be for a garage door replacement or just a simple repair or kind of something in between all of that. Precision Garage Door is DawgNation's choice to get the job done. Whether it's same-day service or just an estimate you need for some future work, they've got you covered on all of that, including a $29 service fee that's waived anytime you get some repair work done. Precision Garage Door Service of Atlanta is a neighborly company. They want to be good neighbors for you by taking good care of you there as well. So request your quote today. It's precisiondoorgeorgia.com. That is precisiondoorgeorgia.com. So one of the things I love is when Georgia fans are taking full advantage of the summer season. Obviously, we can't wait for fall to be here, but y'all, the days are going to go by at the same rate, whether we enjoy this time or not. So we might as well soak up some summer, because when it's fall, we've all got to get our game faces on. So take some time to enjoy yourself here right now. Well, we see evidence every day of folks doing just that. In fact, we'll do this as a golden shoe for you here today. Our buddy Thad Stokes sharing this. He says you get the UGA flag flying high, Glory Glory playing over the speakers for a nice blue marlin being caught at the Bay Point Billfish in Panama City Beach. Now, how about this if you're watching on video? Look at the size of that fish. Look at the Georgia G there in the background. What an amazing thing. You love to see. I mean, how much fun is a little deep sea fishing off the coast there in Panama City? Watch out for the sharks right now, of course. But that's amazing. Gorgeous trophy fish right there. You love to see that. Appreciate that, sharing that with us. And to the folks who brought that prize trophy back to shore with them, congratulations on that. I hope you all are having a great time over in Panama City. Thad will give you a golden shoe, and the folks who brought the fish in a golden shoe there as well. Lousy, stinking Gators, the only thing they're catching these days is a cold. 1,332 days, that's how long it's been since Florida has beaten Georgia. That is our Gator Hater update. I hope you all have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella, Window and Door of Georgia. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. That is what our friends at R.S. Andrews are all about. Speaking of the summertime, our buddy Dari Pero, you know he's enjoying the summer. All kinds of great travel. He's all about all of that. And so we're excited about a fun fall with him coming up here very, very soon there as well. All right. Let's get some of your comments. We'll find out what's going on with all of you, and hope you had a good weekend, a lot of fun. Very, very good. All right, I'm on Facebook. Let me start with the folks that are on Facebook. Philip Jordan Wells having some fun, as he typically does. Zach Adams, Travis McCullough in here, too. Matt Rukavina, it sounds like he's had a little bit of an issue. I don't see what that is yet. Lauren Barber in here talking stuff up. That's a lot of fun. They're talking about how you cook a steak. I am a medium rare fan, and if I had my choice, I would go more on the rare side than the medium side. But I am medium rare. That is my steak preference. But good to see Lauren in here today, having some fun. So I know Matt put something in here, but I haven't seen. Okay. I'm sorry. So Matt Rukavina, his mother-in-law has passed away. Matt, please pass on to your wife how sorry we are about all that, and of course for your loss too on all of that. So, a lot of us have personal experience with very similar stories. So we certainly share our thoughts with you on that, and sincere prayers too. So I'm very, very sorry about that, but obviously we're glad to have you in here with us a little bit. So please let everybody in your family know that. Lauren also mentioned that she likes the Pittsburgh style, which is charred on the outside and kind of bloody, as you kind of get into the center of it, which is, I mean, like, I don't know that I like full-on Pittsburgh necessarily quite as much, but I do kind of like for the char on the outside to sort of give way to a little bit, of a redder center as you kind of come into it. That, to me, is about perfect. When you've got that, that's about perfect. Zach Adams and Travis McCullough having a funny conversation about some of this there, too. So pretty good stuff. Let me go to YouTube for a moment, see what they're doing over here for now. Oh, no. Jay said that somebody's in here not acting right. I apologize. I'm sorry about that. Jonathan Aaron asked me if I'm taking Joey Chestnut's spot on Thursday. I didn't see that where Joey Chestnut is not in the hot dog contest this year, right? Because he signed a deal with one of the fake meat companies or something like that. So dumb. Just the whole thing is dumb. No, I will not be. If I was doing competitive eating, I'd have to do wings or ribs or something like that. In fact, if I was doing competitive eating around ribs or wings, I feel like I'd probably do pretty well. Because now there's going to come a point when you just probably can't eat anymore. If you ever notice, the people who actually win the competitive eating contest are never very big, right? Was it Kobayashi? Is that the guy's name? He wasn't very big at all. Even Joey Chestnut's not really a fat dude. That you would think having a big stomach would make competitive eating easier. As it turns out, probably not. But I think my best chance at competitive eating would be something related to ribs or wings, maybe chocolate chip cookies. I'd probably do pretty well on that. Stephen Anansi says, looking forward to seeing you in Kentucky and in Austin for the Texas game, booked and ready to go. Stephen, I'm thrilled to hear that. Thrilled to hear that. Can't wait to see you there as well. All right. Yeah, I sort of see what you're talking about. I'm sorry. Y'all go ahead and block that dude, and then we'll see if we can do that there as well. But y'all go ahead and block that guy. That's pretty, that's not what we're going to be doing here for sure. That's not what we're going to be doing for sure. And then, Jay, if you're hearing that, I don't know if you can do anything about that or not, but that's not it. That's not it. How about Cody Ledoux checking here? You can always tell when, at least the perception of Alabama is getting a little higher. Cody sort of swing. Cody's going to swing back around there on that and kind of show up there. So Cody must be feeling good about Alabama because he's swinging back around here on this right now. All right, let's see what else. What else is going on YouTube over here? Les going here giving Cody a hard time too, which is funny to see. Motivated Dedicated says the Texas secondary is Swiss cheese. Yeah, Connor had a good story on that at DawgNation the other day about how, two of these big games for Georgia, both those programs, at least, on paper by appearances, may have some issues there in the secondary, which probably puts a little bit of a larger spotlight on Carson Beck for that game. Howard Eubank says he loves Stinch's take on the game. He says, what have you done lately? We'll all start it even. I think that's exactly right. We do love Jon. John's a little bit more level-headed typically than I am, and so I always love his opinion about some of that kind of stuff. By the way, we have a different Cody accusing Cody Ledoux of tarnishing his name, which is also very funny. Cretaceous Williams says, what flavor of wings for eating contest? He says, it'd be honey barbecue for me. Yeah, I think that if you had to eat a ton of them, I think a wet sauce would make it harder. In other words, like you would either go smoked wings with no sauce. This is for the purpose of how many could you eat? Either a smoked wing with no sauce, or like one of those lemon pepper dry rubs if you wanted the flavor. But if you've got them like really wet and swimming, I think you would end up eating fewer of those. I do. I think you would end up eating fewer of those if that was the case. Now, my preference on wings is like either a traditional wing sauce or something like that. I don't like these like super like dripping wet wings. I don't like that. I like more of like a little bit of a glaze than like an actual just dunked in sauce. Mark Woodmansee predicting that Travis Smith does pick us on July 13th. Well, there you go. That's really an interesting prediction because it seems like some of the online chatter as of late might have been kind of veering the other way on that. Frank Patterson also pointing out that for the DawgNation invasion in Austin, it should be real barbecue. He means pork and not what they with that mess they make out there in Texas. Yeah, I mean that's going to be one of the that's one of the things that sort of lets you know about the divide that now exists in the SEC. The fact that a food that we ought to share some commonalities over, like we don't even think of it kind of the same way. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, a good pork barbecue would be the way to go there. Let me go to DawgNation.com, see how they're doing over there. Rambo says we need to land some big linemen. They're going to fight like a trophy marlin. Well, listen, that's exactly what Georgia's trying to do here right now. Fun to see that. Let's see what else. Yeah, funny stuff over here. Yeah, Rambo excited about some big wins along the offensive and defensive line. That should be a lot of fun there, too. Let's see what else is going on. Brody Williams says, how many Oklahoma and Texas fans on here trolling the number one podcast in the world? First of all, Brody, appreciate the kind of words there on that. And, no doubt some of these, folks from just newly into the SEC are sort of figuring out what's going on around here. There's no doubt there's some of that going on. I think you're right about that. Let's see what else is going on. Barry Watkins expressing some skepticism about a receiver choosing Georgia, which, giving the lingering issues, sort of understand where that comes from. But we think there's probably even still a long way to go on the C.J. Wiley front there, too. Randy Hall calling for Georgia to get 8 more commits in this month, upcoming month, to kind of match what happened the month of June. Perhaps that's the case. Maybe it does play out that way. Baggins and Friends says, how about you marinate the wings in orange juice and brown sugar and cook them on the grill? That actually sounds really good, Baggins. That sounds really good. Really good, in fact. Cody mentioning something we talked about a little earlier, the fact that the South Carolina commit Shamari Earls might eventually flip to Georgia. That would be a very big deal. Let's see what else. Johnny Surfdog says after 3 undefeated regular seasons in a row, they threw a very tough schedule at us this year, and I can't wait. Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's interesting to think that, of course, the schedule is the kind that you would think almost no one, could sort of conquer. And yet, when you realize, well, Georgia's still going to be a point spread favorite in all these games, perhaps it also emerges there, too, that if Georgia were to go undefeated against this schedule, it'd be making one of the biggest statements any program's ever made. Very, very tricky and very, very difficult to do. Porter giving you a go, Dogs. You love that. Let's see what else. Johnny Surf Dog says he likes the less heralded blue-collar wide receivers. Well, certainly Georgia's done pretty well with some of those. Guys who were like, sort of three-star recruits or less. I'm thinking about Ladd. I'm thinking about A.D. Mitchell. I mean, as we said before, Georgia's ability to scout the wide receiver position is probably unmatched, even if their ability to win with some of these recruits isn't always perfect. Frank Patterson, he says he's hashtag team vinegar based when it comes to barbecue sauce, which I don't hate. Foster Moss says if Georgia goes undefeated with this schedule and what could come in the playoffs, they may go down as the best team ever. It would have to be considered one of the best single-season performances of all time, too. And when you think about 2 previous national championships, I always sort of feel like when it comes to the idea of a dynasty in sports, I feel like my definition of dynasty is a lot more, I guess, broad than some people's are. Because I think anytime you kind of win a couple of championships, you're sort of in sort of a dynastic type situation. So, I mean, if Georgia were to win it again, and if they were to perhaps go undefeated against this schedule, I think you'd be removing all doubt about what not just the fact that Georgia had achieved dynasty status, but that it's fully supplanted, what was the Nick Saban dynasty prior to that. I think you're right. All right. Frank Patterson says, we have said that we see a way that Georgia could potentially go 9-3. If you look at the Texas schedule, what do you think their worst case scenario would be? All right, let's pull that up and find out. First of all, I don't know that I buy even a worst case for Georgia being 9-3, but obviously I guess anything's possible. But let's look at the Texas schedule here for a moment. So I think one of the telling games is going to be early in the year, week 2 at Michigan, because I'm just of the general belief that this is going to be a Michigan team that's far below what it was a year ago, just not nearly that same level. So going to Ann Arbor will be pretty telling. Like if that game is close, if Texas doesn't really assert itself on the road right there, that may give you a little bit of an idea that, hey, maybe they're not quite ready for what the season's going to require from them. But if you look at, for the most part, at their SEC schedule, I mean, a lot of people think that Texas got a big favor from the SEC. September 28th, Mississippi State, we would expect that not to be very close. The week before Georgia, it's the game against Oklahoma. So interesting, they've got Oklahoma and Georgia in back-to-back weeks. That's pretty tricky. I think that Oklahoma could be better than a lot of people think, but Texas is probably still the favorite there. And then you get into a situation where their next crop of SEC games after Georgia are all pretty favorable. It's at Vanderbilt. You got to play somebody on the road. That's a really big gift for Texas. A home game against Florida. They'll be a huge favorite there. At Arkansas, that's a big game to Arkansas people, and Arkansas has beaten Texas before. Once again, that's a pretty favorable road game for Texas. Kentucky, then at Texas A&M. Now, listen, the energy around that game in College Station is going to be through the roof, and A&M is one of those teams that some people also think could be better than perception would suggest here right now. But, I mean, against that schedule, I would sort of say 10-2 at worst. I mean, I don't think unless Texas just really falls apart, I don't see how you get to 9-3 on that. I really don't. K-Dog says this schedule sets up well because if we run the table, they can't say we had a cupcake schedule. Yeah, I mean, it sort of stands to reason that if Georgia takes care of its business here this year, K-Dog, then, there'd be almost no response possible. I mean, that Georgia would have obviously essentially removed all doubt. I think you'd be right about that. All right, 1 or 2 more comments, then we're going to go. Barry Watkins, Alan Verbanchik also talking about the need for Georgia at receiver in the 2025 class, just given what you expect to lose off next year's team. Howard Eubanks talking about the lack of Texas depth and how they could be impacted if there are injuries. Perhaps that's true. I know they've got some guys to replace there along the defensive line. Uncle Sam says the only reason why Michigan won the national title is because they didn't have to play Georgia. Maybe that's the case. Hunter Lacey reminding that Georgia has a chance at history this year, becoming the first team to ever go 16-0. That's a big ask from anybody, but if Georgia would do that, it'd be an all-time accomplishment. Jay Shipe says he took under Texas 10.5, over for Georgia at 10.5, and under 5.5 for the Gators, all $50 bets. So Jay Shipe's giving you an idea of what he's thinking for the upcoming season. All right, we are going to bounce out of here for now. Good stuff from all of you. Thanks for being with us here today. Normal show for us Tuesday, Wednesday. Off to at least semi-normal. We got some of our regular guests sort of sliding around here a little bit. But normal Tuesday, Wednesday, off completely on Thursday for the holiday, then back live here again on Friday. Y'all check out RS Andrews online at rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They will show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust them on all of that. It is hot. You need to stay cool. RS Andrews can help you do that by getting your air conditioning unit tuned up. So find them online at rsandrews.com for more on that. Y'all have a great day. Back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then.